Hello everyone, I'm Elton Dixon, president of ENA Coaching. This is the online version of one of our professional development modules called the Nurturing Caregiver. So please sit back, relax. You're going to learn a lot in this session, and we're going to be talking about a lot of things that normally we like to do in a group session live in person so that we can get a lot of conversation going. But in this version, you're going to be able to type in some responses to different questions and scenarios so that you can share some of what you know about this topic. Because when it comes to being a nurturing caregiver, if you're watching this video, you are probably already a caregiver, maybe an experienced one, maybe brand new, but something in your heart really moved you to take on a role, a professional role in the life of some young person who really needs you, someone from one of the vulnerable populations that we all work with, and you just saw the need to make that connection. All right, so we're going to get right into our introduction and talk about something that I think is great to set the stage for why it's so important to think about this topic, being a nurturing caregiver. So first of all, if you look at these different roles here, you know, all of these different types of caregivers who work in the lives of youth in foster care, you know, we have site directors. Everyone who works at a group home is familiar with interacting with the site director. There are caseworkers. Sometimes the folks that are staff at a group home are called caseworkers, but other times we're talking about maybe the DFACS caseworkers, the folks who arrange the affairs of young people in care. Then, of course, there are counselors, people who work on the mental wellness of the young people that live in care. CASAs, this is court-appointed special advocates, people who are specially trained and volunteer to look out for the legal rights and legal protections of young people in care. And then the natural family members or even friends of family that interact with young people while they're in care. And then the school system, that's a huge part of the leadership and caregiving roles present in a young person's life when they're in foster care. And usually it's a school system that they are new to, that they've moved around and have to keep on readjusting to. So if you think about it, it's extremely important for there to be a high level of coordination between all these different caregivers because they may have competing interests. I don't think the competition of those interests is on purpose, but sometimes it just turns out to be that each of these caregivers can kind of pull in a slightly different direction, share different types of information, give different guidance or advice to a young person in care, you know, intending to make a positive difference, but sometimes it clashes with others who are in this ecosystem of care. So when we want to create a nurturing environment, it's that much more important that every one of these people who play a role in that young person's life understand what the others are doing and that our efforts are coordinated. And there's one other key stakeholder in the life of that young person, and that is the young person themselves. If anyone on this list or that young person loses sight of the main interest we should all have, it makes a very weak bridge from where they are to success. And what that interest should be is the well-being and the best outcomes for that young person. So all of us have to be focused on good outcomes for them, and we need to encourage that young person to have their own best interest in mind too, so that everyone's working on the same page. So that is what sets the stage for nurturing environments when we talk about being caregivers in these young people's lives. So I like to also knock out a few things that many people assume maybe coming into a conversation like this. You know, professional development takes a little bit of energy aside from all the other things that you do to sit back and learn or increase your skills in what you do because you are a professional. So sometimes doing a session like this might feel like we're saying, hey, does this training imply that I'm doing something wrong? No. We can all learn more. We can all build upon our skills. So it's not that it's pointing out something that's being done incorrectly, but it helps us refine all of our work. And if something is not constructive or productive, then yeah, we do want to eliminate that and replace unproductive behaviors and habits and systems with productive ones. We've already tried this stuff. What's the difference? You know, sometimes I know caregivers feel like you're getting lots of pointers from all different directions about how to be a better caregiver. Well, it may feel like you've tried a lot of techniques and maybe feels like it's just not really going anywhere. But what we want to stress in this presentation is that no one individual can do the right things and have the best outcomes. It takes the entire ecosystem of care doing productive things to get the best outcomes. So it might feel like you're pushing a big rock up a hill and then it rolls back down at night and you got to roll it up there again the next morning. It may feel like that unless we're all pushing together and in the same direction. There's no solution. This is as good as it gets in foster care. It might feel like, no matter what we do, this is just an environment and a population where you're just not going to see that much improvement. I, unfortunately, working across the state, have heard attitudes kind of like that. And if I haven't heard that thought process, sometimes the work that is done reveals that might be what's in someone's heart. But I want to encourage everyone to know that when leaders create the right environment, anyone can thrive. So it's our job to figure out how to create that environment and give young people and ourselves the best chance to thrive. Some might think, hey, you don't know what it's like. You don't know what to tell me if you haven't actually lived in the cottage with these young people and struggled, waking up late at night, solving problems, putting out fires, dealing with fights and arguments. It may feel that way, but my team's been very blessed to have been doing this work for 10 years. And we've worked with lots of different professionals. We've worked directly with young people. And I will also add, a big part of our work is dealing with their academics. So we'll see kids get off the school bus and come straight to us for more of what may feel like school. That has the potential to be a pretty hostile environment. Kids leaving school to come back to school. But we've worked really hard to really connect with young people and create an environment that they enjoy coming to. So if we've had success in this environment, then I'd say maybe we have some things to share about what others can do in the other settings in which you'll find youth in care. So those are some of the assumptions. If any of these have been on your mind, please be honest about that and share some of those thoughts in the sections of this session where you get to give some feedback, because we learn from that and we try to improve our work in doing these professional development trainings. All right, so one more thing for the introduction. This is the picture that I would like for us to keep in our minds as we're talking about being a nurturing caregiver. In our live session recently, I asked the group, what does the word nurturing mean to you? It may mean slightly different things or have a slightly different connotation for some people. And nurturing might feel like it's talking about being a really sensitive, touchy-feely person who has your emotions on your sleeve and you're just really attuned to everyone else's feelings. And you may not see yourself as that kind of person. You might see yourself as more of a type A, go-getter, not really emotionally driven. You might be kind of a mission-driven person and say, nurturing caregiver, that doesn't sound like that's talking to me. But what we want to make sure that everybody understands is that nurturing is not a personality type. It is a system of behaviors, and it is an environment that we create as leaders. Anyone can do the work of producing a nurturing environment. And if we think about nurturing, we can think about it the way that a farmer might think about taking care of a field, okay? It's not about emotions, it's about doing certain things to get the harvest that you want to see one day. So a lot of us working in care, we believe we're planting good seeds, and we are planting good seeds in the lives of young people, and we look at that soil as the heart of that young person. And if it's good soil, we want to see a good result, so we hope that right away some kind of beautiful harvest of fruit just pops out, not long after all the good influence and good intentions that we apply in the beginning. But what's more helpful to think about is that this is a process. No wise farmer, no wise gardener has ever thrown seeds in the ground yesterday and expected a blossom like this the next day. We know that it's a process, and in between planting the seeds and seeing the fruit is this process. Under the soil, before we ever see anything sprout out of the ground, there's a lot going on under the soil, invisible to our eyes, but extremely important. From those seeds, they split open and a taproot begins to go down looking for water, looking for nutrients to set a strong foundation for what's going to grow up out of the ground. If we become impatient during this time of growth in a young person's life, where we've planted seeds and begun to water them, but you just don't see the kinds of outcomes, the kinds of behaviors you hope to see later on, you just don't see it yet, we can get frustrated in this phase and start kicking those seeds up out of the ground with negative words, negative behaviors, things that frustrate that young person or expect more of them than they are trained and able to give us. So this is an extremely important phase because it means that we have to persevere in faith that what we planted one day will produce fruit, but we just have to wait for that time to come. And then one day you do see a sprout. You do see something fantastic, a new and positive behavior, new and positive language coming from that young person, from those wonderful positive seeds that we planted. And you see that sprout. We have to be careful not to demand fruit out of a sprout. The sprout is new. It's fragile. It needs encouragement. It needs that sunlight. It's still growing, and it's not doing anything wrong. It is doing exactly what a sprout should be doing. Sprouting, okay? But then if we let that process continue, yes, one day we will see mature fruit. I share a parable from the Bible when I talk about this picture here, the parable of the sower. In the parable of the sower in the Bible, Jesus is talking to a group of people, a crowd of folks, disciples, and they're listening to what he's sharing about a farmer who goes out with a bag of seed and he casts that seed out in his field. Some of the seed lands on the path where the farmer walks between the places where he plants so he doesn't step on his new growth. And some of that seed that falls on the path, the birds come along and eat it up right away. It never produces anything. Some of the seed falls on really stony ground. That hard, packed ground lets the seed come in, and it takes a little bit of a root. But when it sprouts up, it lasts for a little while. But when hard times come, when the scorching sun comes out, it just dries up that sprout, and it never really becomes anything. Some of that seed falls on what he calls thorns and thistles, weeds. And it grows up. It grows up pretty strong, pretty tall, but it becomes choked out by all those weeds and thorns and thistles, and it never really bears any fruit. Then finally, there's a part of the soil that's good soil, and that seed lands there, and then it brings forth a full harvest that's multiplied over and over again. So Jesus explains this parable. He says, well, the seed that falls on the path, it's sort of miscast seed. It just falls in a place where the enemy can come along and snatch it up right away before it ever produces anything. The seed that falls on that stony ground is like good words that fall on a stony, offended, hurt, abused heart. The person's glad to hear that good news, but when testing comes, when hard times come, when bad habits come back to their memory, it never really bears any fruit. And the seed that falls amongst those thistles and thorns, he says those weeds represent the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches. When we get captivated by things that are passing and don't matter, have no long-term value, and the energy put into that chokes out the energy that should go into growing good fruit. And it says, although that seed grows up into tall plants, it never bears fruit. Then finally, there's the seed that lands on good soil, and that's like seed landing on a heart that is prepared and ready to receive that seed, and it bears a lot of fruit. So the reason why I mentioned that scripture is because we as leaders have the opportunity to create a nurturing environment by taking care of the soil in the field we've been given to be stewards over. That means rather than trying to cast our very good seed on really hurt hearts, we take the time to build connections, pluck up those stones, turn that soil, soften it up through a process that helps those young people be able to receive all the good things that we want to share with them so that they actually can produce a harvest. So let's let that introduction kind of soak in, and the rest of our presentation is going to talk about some of the ways and mindsets in which we become those nurturing caregivers that know how to take great care of the garden that we've been given.